How many of y'all saw Black Panther? Throw your Wakandas up. Okay? Now, we know if you didn't see it, and if you saw it, you are resisting the urge to yell Wakanda? Okay. And you wanted to yell Wakanda forever because it made you feel something, likely something that you had never felt before. With that said, Black Panther moved so many around the world, around the globe. If you check the box office receipts, obviously the story is right there. But it moved many people in the Black community because it offered us as Black people a vital representation on an international, multiplex scale. It also moved the world in massive ways, from China, Japan, of course, on the continent as well. But what most of us saw was the depiction of a place rooted specifically in African culture before it was decimated by the brutal forces of colonization. I walked into the film as a 40-year-old man, and watching Black Panther transported me back to being a 7-year-old African kid, okay, growing up in America. And not just any kid, a kid growing up in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio was a bit of a different place, and it wasn't necessarily the most culturally welcoming environment when I arrived there. I'm not sure if you can see it, and perhaps not yet, but let me paint this picture a little bit clearer for you. An African kid growing up in America, first generation here, trying to understand and find my way, moving around public school, making friends. An African boy who was, to quote the poet James Weldon Johnson, with skin darker than 100 midnights. Do you see it now? I'm dark as 100 midnights, so I'm sure you can see it. I realized I wasn't watching the movie as an informed adult. I was watching the movie as an aching, wounded young child. An African immigrant child aching to be accepted, looking to be embraced, and unconsciously seeking validation that he belonged. I wanted to be what was right in this world and not what was wrong. I wanted to be accepted by my Black American friends as well as my African friends, and I wanted the freedom to be able to roam in both of those spaces equally. Unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily the case at that time when I was growing up. I also would say that in growing up in middle America, it taught me a lot about tolerance from other people and how you have to educate people on your culture and what you want them to see. But many of the messages I was fed about my kind of Black said that I was wrong. Kids at school teased me. The media did not portray me. Songs did not speak of me, and print, unfortunately, did not picture me. It wasn't just that Black was wrong, but specifically, my kind of Black was wrong. So that ostracized 7-year-old child looking up at the screen, he was no longer wrong. I saw a reflection of myself. There on the screen was the image that I needed to see of kings, warriors, a depiction of a younger version of Osei that said, "Your Black is the beginning. Your Black belongs here." T'Challa, the Black Panther, was my kind of Black, surrounded by warriors that were my kind of Black, surrounded by people, celebrating people who were my kind of Black. Emotions overwhelmed me, and finally seeing the positive depiction of Black men and women on the big screen in a way that we'd never seen each other before, as bona fide heroes. Very, very important. We aren't really given the images of ourselves in a positive manner. Now, some of you are scratching your heads and wondering, what is Osei talking about when he speaks of my kind of Black? So let me give you a few examples. You're so Black that when you smile, the stars come out. I know you got one in you. Or you're so Black that your blood type is oil. You're so Black. Anybody want to fill in the blanks? It's okay. You get the picture. You get the picture right now. I say all that to say that before I take you on a black lesson, I want to take you on a cultural lesson, okay? And we are talking about color and not culture, all right? In the English language, the word so can be used as an adverb, as in you are so beautiful, or you are so black. In this instance, the adverb so indicates that the thing it modifies has degrees of being, all right? Like saying black, blacker, blackest, blackety black, you choose. So in the instance of so black, we are talking about the highest degree. And the fact that you so black jokes even exist speaks to the degree of blackness, so to speak. Again, we're talking about color and not culture, so relax. We are not doing the brown paper bag test, and no one here will be excluded from the cookout, all right? You do have to prove that you can play spades, though, all right? I don't make the rules, I just convey them. Black people cover the spectrum of brown skin and brown so light that some find themselves defending their blackness, and brown so dark that some find themselves defending their worth. One of my good frat brothers, he told me, he said, Osei, skin color has a value system. And I knew he was right because I saw how white people were treated, and then I saw the spectrum as to how black people were treated, even by other black people, all right? Sometimes black people were treated progressively worse based on their complexion. And we know sometimes fair-skinned or lighter-complected black people were treated better, given more passes than their darker-complected counterparts. This is a phenomenon known as colorism. Colorism, as defined by Maddox and Gray in the 2002 research study, is the tendency to perceive or behave toward members of a racial category based on the lightness or darkness of their skin tone. And this colorism goes beyond the experience of 7-year-old Osei. It is a research phenomenon. In 1997, Averhart and Bigler published their research findings and found that black first graders are more likely to remember stories in which light-skinned individuals are portrayed positively rather than their dark-skinned counterparts who are portrayed negatively. This is learned behavior, and it is taught so early on that children find themselves having that ingrained. They find colorism is ingrained in them. How? Because filmmakers, novelists, advertisers, modeling agencies, matchmaking websites, and many forms of media reinforce these images, all right? They all demonstrate the power of a fair complexion along with straight hair and Eurocentric facial features. Now, just so we really have understanding, in Africa, there are many people who are bleaching their skin as we speak, okay? Studies even show that darker-skinned black individuals get harsher treatment from the police. Now, it's funny. Comedian Ari Spears, y'all know Ari Spears? Very funny guy. In one of his popular stand-up routines, he jokes about Barack Obama's mainstream appeal. He jokingly states that if Barack Obama was Bernie Mac Black or Precious Purple, he would not have won. Now, that's the spectrum that I'm speaking to. So why is my kind of black not worthy of the presidency? It's perception often. It is often feels like the media vindicates itself when showing the dark-skinned black man as the menacing character, often leaving him to be portrayed as the brute. Now, LeBron James was the first black man on the cover of Vogue magazine. And how did they portray him? Well, they portrayed the dark complexion, philanthropist, businessman, distinguished athlete, husband, and father as a beast with a white woman in one arm as if he were going to run off with her. Now, that image has also been depicted when it comes to King Kong. People made light of the situation, and the usual, oh, but he was okay with it, was tossed around. But on a grander level, this was certainly bound to subconsciously influence people's thoughts of dark-skinned black men and reinforce those already implanted biases. Now, the colorism phenomenon is not new. Jazz culture took New York City by storm in the 20s, and no place embodied jazz culture more than the Cotton Club. All right? Visitors from around the world took the A train uptown to Sugar Hill to hear Duke Ellington and other jazz greats perform at the all-white, or perform in front of an all-white audience at the Cotton Club. They also came to see the featured copper-colored gals. Now, this was the club's troupe of lovely, light-skinned dancers. Now, the white owners of the Cotton Club had a strict rule for young female performers. Their skin had to be lighter than a brown paper bag. Now, this unequal treatment based on complexion did not start at the Cotton Club. It goes back to slavery, when the white slave owners would treat enslaved Africans differently based on the complexion of their skin, often delegating house or less laborious duties to fair-skinned individuals while delegating more of the harsh work for dark-skinned or field slaves. Now, I've discussed how others treat us, but let's also take a look at how we treat one another. Let's revisit the Cotton Club paper bag test. The paper bag test was a test used to determine if a person was light enough to be a member of a group and sometimes to be admitted to a particular event. Prominent historian Henry Louis Gates Jr., in his book, The Future of the Race, recalls some of the brothers who came from New Orleans held a bag party. As a classmate explained it to me, a bag party was a New Orleans tradition wherein a brown paper bag was stuck on the door and anyone darker than that bag could not enter. Audrey Elisa Kerr, a professor of African American literature, documents this as well, reporting that the brown paper bag test was used by African American fraternities, sororities, churches, and social clubs as well. And this happened throughout the 20th century. Now, we cannot forget how Spike Lee's movie, School Days, how many of y'all saw School Days? If not, it's really a testament in terms of what we're talking about right here. School Days brought colorism in the African American community to the forefront, and it became a national dialogue with the battle between the gamma rays and the darker skinned women's group who were just identified as non-Greek. And the subliminal aspect of this really tells us something. It makes you think. Now, it's a dialogue we have been reluctant to dive into because oftentimes we feel as if we have bigger fish to fry. But it's an issue nonetheless. But the good news is this. Studies show that when it's time for us to come together on the treatment and rights of black people, we are in solidarity. Despite knowing that a caste system exists based on color, we throw that aside and we fight collectively. Now, this perplexes a lot of people, and it so perplexed them till they gave it a name, and they call it the skin color paradox. Now, despite the overarching fight for the equality of black people, we must discuss our own intra-racial woes. We must chip away at colorism in our own community. Now, we were all kings and queens before we arrived, and with that said, it's important that we rise. And what does that mean? Rational, intentional, secure, and equalizing. Rational. If we think that centuries of colonization and being tortured into believing that white was right did not leave an imprint on our psyche, then we are absolutely being irrational. Before we can begin to attack colorism and its impact on our community, we must first acknowledge that colorism exists and it has tangible impacts, and there is something we can and must do about that. This leads us to being intentional. Now, if you've ever participated in diversity, equity, and inclusion training, you are taught to be intentional about acknowledging your inherited bias. My coach, Dietrich Giles, says, I can't teach you to not be biased, but I can teach you to catch your thoughts before it becomes a behavior that adversely impacts another individual. Once we recognize that we have biases based on color, we have to be intentional about correcting that and catching those biases before they find themselves on another person. We've got to counteract these things. Colorism is not just directed at darker-hued individuals. If you talk to anybody light-skinned or fair-skinned, they have their share of jokes as well, right? And they've oftentimes had to defend their blackness, unfortunately. Light, bright, and damn near white. Something that many of us have also heard. The bottom line is these jokes in the imprint of colorism has shaken how secure we are in who we are and the worth that we attach to our skin color and overall appearance. Go watch the movie Good Hair by Chris Rock, and then you can appreciate that even our definition of black is beautiful is being sabotaged on all levels. Existing in the skin you're in seems to be the sin. And look no further than the brothers and sisters who have to fight for the natural right to wear their natural hair in the workplace. But that's another TED Talk. We have to acknowledge that our security has been attacked, and if we're going to overcome this, we must be secure as individuals and stop having to either defend our blackness or our value as a black person. Lastly, we must be equalizing. This means knowing the data on how colorism presents itself and impacts our community, and making space and time to correct the implications. Just as we want corporations to create equity plans, we must do the same thing in our own communities. We must teach black and brown children that their kind of black is worthy, it is beautiful, and it is to be celebrated. Now, no one wants to fight two battles at the same time, and this is what our community has been doing for way too long. Externally, we fight for equality in a world that has been ruled by white supremacist propaganda. And internally, we fight a war of colorism amongst one another that we inherited from our colonizers and oppressors. But ashe, we have stepped out of the physical chains, and it is now time for us to remove the psychological chains that many of us still are in bondage with, all right? So, with that said, how can we be Wakanda forever without internal unity? I hope that this conversation doesn't stop here. I hope that you keep the conversation going. It's very important for future generations, particularly the children that are now and how we see ourselves. It seems like there is an intentional attack on being who you are, being the person that you were born to be. And that's really what I'm speaking to. I also want to encourage each and every one of you to go to the continent. And you can think of me as your first African cousin, but go see your other African cousins as well. Thank you for your time. Peace and blessings. Yep.